Word on the streets, it's BowlzNBeatz. What's good, everybody, and welcome back to another episode with your host, X. As you know, the herb community is celebrating 420 this month, so I thought, what a better way than to educate everybody about the plant. And here to join me on the conversation is legend Shabaaz. Woo!
Thanks for having me, X. Appreciate
you?
it. I'm good. I'm just counting my blessings because I know I've been trying to get on this podcast for a minute here. So appreciate you having me, especially in such a monumental week. You're the hostess with the mostest, so I'm excited to be here.
So for people who don't know you, let them know who you are and what you do.
Such a good question because sometimes I don't even know what I do anymore. Cannabis industry has given me a lot of different opportunities, but really right now what I do primarily is I have an ecosystem. I cultivate an ecosystem of different companies that plug into that ecosystem, and I help those companies essentially grow, scale, understand new markets, understand ways to transform their organizations, whatever the case is. But it's fully focused on the cannabis industry today, and it's also focused in a very global sense. So I'm doing work across Canada, of course, because Canada are the capital knowledge leaders of the world, knowledge capital leaders of the world, and now New York, a lot of work, and then of course Europe and hopefully South America too. So I believe that even though I've been in this journey for 6 years, it's only just beginning.
Honestly. And one thing I love about our community is that everyone working it right now has a passion for it. Because there's so much stigma around it, it's still a new industry. Everyone who's working in this industry really wants it to thrive. So I'm asking you personally, why cannabis? Why did you choose this industry to work in?
Wonderful question. I think everyone at some point is going to have some sort of relationship with this plant. It just depends on your relationship, similar to how people have relationships with time, with money, with alcohol, with whatever the case is. I think cannabis is going to be a key pillar for every single person in some shape, way, or form. For me, the reason I got into this industry was a couple things. So number one, my family's from East Africa, from Kenya. Represent. This is what this is right here. And to an East Indian kind of ancestry. So I grew up with the languages of Swahili and Gujarati primarily. And cannabis was obviously very stigmatized. Growing up, I was in a household that kind of three main things mattered. Education, of course, brown parents, sports. My dad used to be a professional cricket player, a wicketkeeper for the Kenyan national team, and of course, religion. Nowhere in that was this opportunity to kind of go outside of those pillars and evolve your mind and things like that.
Right.
As I started to grow up, I have one of my uncles is an alcoholic, and a lot of people would say he's doing bad things because he's consuming cannabis, but a lot of people don't realize that it was actually the 6 old Milwaukees that he was drinking a day. And the cannabis was actually the thing that was helping him, stay straight. And so I got to see that and got to see the plant really stigmatized. And then as I was growing up, in getting into school and university and things like that, I play a lot of soccer, and I saw that a lot of guys, when you start to get 18, 19, 20 years old, you'd be kind of drinking beers after the game to relax and things of that nature, and I just couldn't understand why no one was trying the plant. Obviously it was very stigmatized at that point and still is, and so I started to learn a little bit about the plant more from like a wellness, rest, and relaxation perspective, and then I kind of took that through, and so there was kind of the wellness aspect, but then there's also the unit economics perspective. I know it doesn't look like it, but I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to economics and finance and different things of that nature. And I sold to coming from kind of an immigrant family, I didn't necessarily have the abilities to I had a lot of debt in school, as many do, especially now in this country. More on that later. But I sold weed in second year university to essentially help fund my university, and that's where I learned a lot about unit economics and selling and understanding consumer segments and things like that. So from an education perspective, it taught me a lot about business as well. And then finally, one of the reasons, one of my core factors in working in this industry is kind of the alleviation of opioids and painkillers in kind of everyday society. Painkillers scientifically are terrible for you, but they're the only thing that's really prescribed after a big surgery or anything like that. And it's just, there's not enough education on kind of plant medicine. And so that's kind of my driving force. And then finally, it's just to change one mind at a time using all those kind of pillars.
Wow, that was a whole mic drop moment, honestly. I related to that so much, and this is why I want to have conversations like these because we're not alone. You talking about your uncle, I've literally been there. Been there personally, you guys. Like, I used to drink a lot because it was so normalized. Like, every weekend, you're at the club, you want to have fun, Snapchat, it's that
So
lifestyle.
normalized.
And I would literally wake up feeling sick. It got to the point where, like, I was constantly feeling nauseous, like, just gross. And I was smoking weed as well. And I would notice when I did smoke weed, I would feel much better than I did when I'd smoke alcohol. I mean, smoke alcohol.
I want to smoke some alcohol. I
Drink
think.
alcohol. And then so eventually I just stopped drinking. I'm like, you know what? It's the alcohol. I need to cut it out. And I've been Cali sober for 3 years now.
Wow, congratulations.
Thanks.
Wow.
For those of you that don't know, Cali sober means you don't do anything besides smoking weed.
Yeah.
And I can tell you guys right now, it was the alcohol. Like, I do not feel sick anymore. I don't feel depressed anymore. I wake up loving my mornings. I used to hate mornings. I just feel more grateful for my life. I was, like, very depressed back then. And it's just weird to see people, like, stigmatize it. Like, people know I don't drink anymore, but they'll still stigmatize the fact that I smoke. And it's like, I'm living such a great, healthy lifestyle, more healthy than I've ever lived, and I'm still getting stigmatized. It's just, like, ridiculous.
It's so crazy, and alcohol is literally everywhere. I find myself wondering anytime I travel, how many bottles of wine are being drank in this evening by whatever the case is. You go out on King Street, Toronto, you go anywhere, there's alcohol everywhere in your face, and if you don't have a drink in hand, it's some sort of taboo, which is so interesting and wild. And it's like, between alcohol and cigarettes, they're so normalized, but all of a sudden people can't change their minds on things like cannabis, and people can't put the two things together, that you can be this incredible son, daughter, athlete, creator, whomever, and you can consume cannabis. And I think that that's the stigma that we're obviously fighting to battle. But I love that. I love to hear that you've been Cali sober for 3 years.
Thanks.
I've been doing a sober April, and I'm so happy because I love tequila and I love wine. Those are the only two things I genuinely love from an alcohol perspective. But it's nice being able to wake up no hangover, and also fitness wise, the calories.
100%. 100. Like, my looks physically went on a 360 as well. I was like, whoa. I did not realize how bad alcohol was really, like, affecting my body until I stopped drinking completely.
I'm still waiting for that, for mine to kick
Honestly,
in, but
it's an amazing
it'll come
feeling.
soon.
But unfortunately, I still get stigmatized. So it's hard to be, like, proud of myself when there's people around me like, oh, but you always smoke weed, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but I am healthy and happy. So
But that's also a microcosm of the human that's saying that, their own insecurities and their own inability to change their mind. I think we're so stuck in this moment of, like, things need to be one way, and you've been taught by so many different experiences that things have to be one way. But if my Kenyan mother can open up her Indian mother can open up her mind to, like, cannabis as a wellness tool, or whatever the case is, every single person can. I just think it's up to that person's ability to see different perspectives and be able to change their mind. A lot of people can't change their mind in today's society.
Right. I mean, that's the goal, especially with this podcast, is to educate everybody and get that stigma out of the way. But honestly, it's hard working in the industry when you have your family stigmatizing you. So how did you kind of get them to stop doing that? Because that's where I'm at right now. I'm like, my family still holds a huge stigma on it, and they don't see how great it is. So I'm just, like, kind of trying to deal with that. And I know a lot of people are dealing with that too. That's why so many people hide that they smoke weed. They're almost embarrassed, and it's like, it's nothing to be embarrassed about, especially if you're Cali sober. Like, you go, girl.
Yeah, big time.
So how do you deal with family and even coworkers, friends, all stigmatizing?
Death by 1,000 cuts. So I co-founded the Canadian beach soccer team. I've tried to play every sport possible. I try and be a good son, when I can. I try and, be a good friend, and, really try and live a healthy, value-driven lifestyle as it relates to, those perspectives. But one of the ways I kind of help destigmatize it in my family is, so I grew up in a house of 13 people, immigrant family. You come to Canada, it's kind of that play where, there's that communal living.
Right.
And then my family, imagine living in a family of 13, 14 people in today's day and age. That's hectic. You could never do that, all the politics, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of the things I did was I actually, 2 years ago, I embarked on a journey to help bring my family back together. And I actually leveraged cannabis as a tool in that kind of, that web that I was trying to create. And so one of the ways in which we did that was I organized an Eid dinner for my family, and I told them just to show up, not to bring anything. I take care of everything. It was at a great restaurant. But I surprised everyone with, I put like either an edible or a topical or something on the table for all of them so that we could at least get the discussion going.
Right.
And then anytime I produce any type of content, anytime I produce any type of event, one of the reasons I obviously went to Kind Magazine, which I know we'll talk about, but it's just a matter of like getting people to be around it and be okay with not necessarily consuming it, but just being around it and understanding that, hey, like if I take this or if I, consume this, like nothing's going to happen, whatever the case is. So it's just like death by a thousand cuts. Constant education is the name of the game. And that's why I'm trying to create as much content. And that's why you inspire, a lot of people. And that's why I want to be on this podcast because you're doing great work. And a lot of people from, the Portuguese community, the Indian community, the Jamaican community, the,
like
the Chinese
any immigrant community.
Yeah. Especially because Lisbon is also, such a big hotbed of cannabis now. Brazil is obviously, doing some big things as well. So I just think that that's the way I did it. And also, I'm lucky. I came from a blue chip company, Salesforce. I was there for 6.5 years. Everyone said I was crazy leaving and going to the cannabis industry, but I got an awesome. I have an awesome mom, but I have an awesome dad who's just like, you got to go do it, and you got to go against the grain, because when you're at a place where like you're going against the grain, there's no playbook, and so you can create, you can build, you can do whatever, in the based on the premise of like, hey, I'm gonna help you change your mind, I'm gonna help you get 1% better. But so that's kind of the way I looked at it with my family, at least.
So what appealed you the most about working in the cannabis industry? So as you just mentioned, like it's a hard leap. So what appealed you most to take that leap?
The ability to, so context setting, when I was at Salesforce, I had a good job. I was leading a team. I was 25, 26 at the time. I'd spent 6.5 years there. I made President's Club. I learned a lot about kind of the business of selling and building startups and things like that. And two things appealed me into the cannabis industry. Number one, the ability, like I'm not motivated by money. I'm motivated by building and creating legacies and things of that nature. So, a brand new industry where no one knows anything, it's a perfect opportunity to try and be someone who knows something. Yes. Because when you get older, you realize that those people didn't know things. They just started it and they learned as they were doing it. And then the second thing was the fact that I love the world. I like to one of the things I want to be in my life is a global citizen. And I felt like being able to match my business life with kind of the things I like to do in my personal life, which is like travel, go to different countries, meet different people. I felt that cannabis could be this gap where I could always work without working internationally and globally. And cannabis has taken me to some amazing places. I've, gone to Mexico City to run a seminar. I've gone to Europe. I've gone to, I do a lot of work in New York now. So it gives you a nice opportunity to land and expand. And they say if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. But
exactly. Now
when I go somewhere, it's like, I'll go understand like the illicit market. I'll try and I'll actively try and find cannabis and understand how people perceive it there. And then it gives me the ability to write on it and, things of that nature. So that's kind of what's motivating me in this industry.
Right. And I actually love that the industry is new because, like you said, there's so many opportunities still, right? And a lot of people stigmatize it. They don't take it seriously because it's a new industry. So to anybody who's thinking about getting into the industry, what advice can you give them?
It's big business. It really is big business.
It's definitely difficult.
It's difficult, but it depends on what you're motivated by. If you're motivated by, coziness and cushion and, you want a lot of stability, I wouldn't say this is like the right place for you. But if you're motivated by high risk, high reward, that's one place where you can absolutely build it in. But the second thing is, it's a big business. Like you have, all these, pharmaceutical companies concerned about the cannabis industry. You have, these tobacco companies investing in cannabis. You have, different industries across the world. This week alone, I actually posted on LinkedIn. That's where I do most of my content is on LinkedIn. But this week I posted about the fact that not only is it 420 and an amazing holiday, but the fact of the matter is it's like more cannabis was sold last year in Canada than there was shoes sold, which is wild, or dollars for shoes sold. And this week alone, you have, Miami Benzinga Capital Conference, which is, Florida's a rec state or a medical state. They're turning recreationally, but you had a bunch of capital there. Then you have, New York popping off, and then a couple of events there. Then you have, ICBC in Berlin. I mean, you're looking at, Berlin, Miami, New York, as three of many hubs that cannabis is going down. So it's really big business. And the cool thing is even though it's hard and it's challenging, because it's here, it's not going to implode. There's always going to be an industry, and like anything else, evolution theory, the best players will rise to the top. The shitty players and the people who aren't maybe doing things with the right values or trying to step on toes or whatever the case is will kind of float to the bottom. And that's going to be like in every market, but soon we're going to have a truly functioning global market, and that's exciting.
It is. This industry, I feel like, is a future kind of industry. You have to think 5 years ahead.
For sure.
A lot of people are like, why are you doing this podcast if you're getting censored so much? I'm like, it's not a quick thing. It's a long-term thing. In 5 years, when we don't have these regulations anymore, I'll be here to be like, I've been doing this, right? And there's going to be that opportunity for me to grab. And I don't think people understand that right now because there's so much stigma towards it. Like my own family, they're like, so many dispensaries are shutting down. It's not a stable career. And I'm like, there's so many opportunities in this industry. It's not just one. I feel like everybody thinks bud tender. Like they just think bud tender. There's so many different, there's creative directors. Like you were the creative director for Kind, correct?
I was a managing director, yeah.
Right.
Managing director.
So for those of you that don't know what Kind is, it's a festival. I'd say it's a festival, a market, festival market.
Have you been?
It was a fun, I've been twice. Yeah.
Which ones
it was
did you
really
go
fun.
to?
I went to the summer and winter. Okay. Cool. I liked the summer one. It was really good.
Nice. Which it was that at Rendezvous or was that at Cabana? Okay,
Rendezvous.
cool.
That was so sick. For
real,
people that don't know what Kind is, explain to them briefly what it is.
So real quick, Kind is an amazing lifestyle brand that's meant to be cannabis adjacent.
Shout out Kind.
Yeah, Kind's amazing. Shout out to the whole team. I'm so lucky I got the opportunity to work there. Do you want to hear a quick story on how I got to work there and why it happened?
Yes, absolutely, because people don't think that opportunities can be created, so this would be a great example.
The truth is you need to create your own opportunities, especially we're living in a world of, we live in a very expensive world here. If you live in Canada, if you live in the States, whatever the case is, no one's coming to save you. It's really important that you create your own opportunities and you put yourself out there. Yeah. What doors you choose to, walk through is equally of a challenge because you be so good at creating so many opportunities that you might not know which opportunity to take.
Sure.
But the first thing is you need to create your own opportunities because no one on the planet is coming to create those opportunities for you. And that's why I think what you're doing with this podcast is so important because you're giving people a platform, but also you're creating opportunities for whatever you decide to pursue in this industry moving forward. Right. So really quickly, at the time I was working at Dutchie, which is, POS provider, number one or two POS provider and e-com provider for all these retail dispensaries. I was running the Canadian team. Again, really good job. They had just raised $600 million and, they were doing a lot of different things. They were valued at $4 billion, et cetera. And I started to learn a little bit more about Kind. And I was writing a lot on LinkedIn. And the CEO of Kind, Josh Nagel, reached out to me. And he's like, hey, I like your voice. I want to build a trade show. What do you say? I said, I don't want to build a trade show. I want to build a movement. I want to build an experience somewhere where people can come and they can feel very special because at that moment and still in this moment, kindness is like a missing currency in the world. And cannabis can be the vehicle that ties a lot of these pieces together. And honestly, smoking or consuming cannabis makes you a little bit more kind and appreciative.
Right?
Is that not right?
Which is ironic that there's so much stigma because out of all the substances, it's definitely the one that makes you the most kind.
Yeah, and most appreciative. And so,
absolutely.
Again, if I hadn't put myself on LinkedIn out there, I wouldn't have got the opportunity. And thus, Kind Winter Fair was born. I wrote the creative brief on it. And at that time, you couldn't sample to bud tenders. And so one of the things I did was I worked with a couple different sales teams that had a bunch of different bud tenders on lock and basically created the framework for the sampling policy. And so what we did at that Kind Winter Fair, it was the first one. It was at Rebel. It was literally in the heart of COVID. We procured 300 fanny packs, a bunch of different products, and we stuffed the fanny packs and gave them to the bud tenders. And that was kind of like a little offside at the time, but there was no ruling around it or anything like that. But it helped set the stage for the fact that like bud tenders need to sample. Also, it was a place where consumers could come and they could learn about cannabis and be experiential in nature and things like that. My dad was at that show, things like that, and so you have the Kind Winter Fair, Kind Summer Fair, the Kind Gala, the Kind Golf Tournament, and then something called Kind Gardens, which is more of like a leadership conference for bud tenders and sampling. And then you pair that with this beautiful magazine. I don't know if you saw the recent Kind magazine, the solar eclipse with the glasses. Awesome. And so Kind really has 4 pillars: travel and tourism, food and beverage. I'm blanking on them. Food and beverages, sports and wellness, and there's one music and entertainment. And so those 4 kind of pillars wrap around this idea of kindness. And then I like to say that cannabis is like the vehicle that kind of connects everything, because you can consume cannabis and you can enjoy music. You can consume cannabis and you can go play a soccer game like I did 2 nights ago, right? You can consume cannabis and you can travel the world, right? Like whatever. You can find weed every single place on the planet, right, that you go. Yeah. And so that's what Kind is, and they're doing amazing things for the Canadian industry, and I'd highly, highly, highly recommend everyone get out to Kind Summer Fair.
So as you know, this is obviously a 420 episode because there's so much stigma. And you just brought up the fact that it makes you feel kind. And everyone can agree. I've never met anybody who says it doesn't make them feel kind or makes them angry. You know, you're just chilling. The worst you do is you eat too much. And how is that a problem, right? So what does cannabis mean to you in terms of wellness? Because there's always that stigma that everybody who consumes cannabis is lazy. They don't eat well. They're lazy, you know, they don't have any physical activity. They're unsuccessful. So how can you relate cannabis to all those good qualities?
There are so many. It really depends on. So first I'll go back to the fact that no one's in school. You realize as you grow older, you're not taught a lot about a lot of stuff. You're not taught about mortgages. You're not taught about taxes. Right. You're also not taught about the endocannabinoid system, this system in your body that's responsible for regulating your body. Side note, I have a dog. He has an autoimmune disease. He can't regulate his own body, essentially. And so when you think about the idea of like what needs to go into your body and the fact that you only have one body, and the fact that we weren't told about this endocannabinoid system and these CB1 and CB2 receptors, I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing, but speaks volumes to like, the lack of being able to kind of share that information because of, stigma and the war on drugs and things like that. And so from a wellness perspective, the first component is really around the idea of like, what outcome are you trying to achieve, right? And so we talked a little bit earlier about like painkillers and things like that, morphine, hydromorphone, oxy, Percocets, et cetera, et cetera. These are the only things that are prescribed, and after surgeries and things like that, and they have extreme addictive qualities, and they're just not good for you and things of that nature. But because doctors aren't allowed to prescribe cannabis, or they are allowed to prescribe cannabis but in only specific jurisdictions or through specific channels, it gets really, really challenging. So first and foremost, my thoughts on this are cannabis is a medicine first and foremost, and that's the number one thing. Recreational, illicit, whatever. Cannabis is a medicine. And it's a medicine that needs to be explored considerably. Like the cannabis plant is wonderful. Everyone thinks about THC, CBD, but you have all these different cannabinoids that when working together really have the ability to drive an outcome. The other night I gave my dad, he couldn't sleep because he just had knee surgery. He didn't want to take any perks or anything like that. So I gave him, CBG, 1 milliliter of CBG, nighttime sleep oil by Axia. Worked really, really well. So from the perspective of wellness, before you even get into the wellness idea, because wellness is more of like a recreational term, I think. It's like it's a $1 billion word that like, I don't know, it seems like everyone has latched onto, including myself lately. But it's a medicine first and foremost. Yeah. When I think about cannabis from a wellness perspective, I really think about, from my perspective, the idea of like, all right, still trying to be an athlete in today's day and age. I still play a lot of soccer, still do a lot of I'm trying to run a couple marathons this year. Pre and post is really, really important. So the whole idea is it's like,
that's so cool.
What can you do to prepare yourself for that run beforehand? So before I run, I'll take magnesium, I'll smoke a J, whatever the case. Last half marathon I did that. But what if you could actively understand the cannabinoids that were going into your body so that your body is the best prepared it can be to, withstand that, long run. And then after the fact, I think I gave you the bath salts from Jubilee, from a recovery perspective, from like a muscle recovery perspective and things like that. Soaking with the bath salts, really, really important. I'm sure everyone takes Epsom salts and things like that. And so all of a sudden, there's 3-4 places where cannabis can really, drive into your wellness. I know a lot of people like to do yoga, things like that, but it's all about, I think, mind state, preparation, and then obviously longevity. I think the biggest thing for wellness in cannabis is like, you can leverage cannabis from a longevity perspective. Like, you can't have a drink of wine and go work out. I don't know if anyone's ever done that, but you feel bad.
You could, but you shouldn't.
You shouldn't, or drink a beer, whatever. I could never do that. But like cannabis, it's like you appreciate the workout a little bit more. You're a little bit more involved in that workout. You're a little bit more aware of that workout. And so I think from like a rest, a recovery, a preparation perspective, you look at even parents. I'm not a parent yet, but I have friends who are, and from the perspective of just like a long day afterwards, and just instead of grabbing a beer, grabbing a drink, it's like how do you kind of like get balanced, get level again, and that could be through whatever cannabis consumption you want, and so wellness means a lot. I guess what I'm trying to say, and long way to say it is, it's something that, and goes back to like the relationship, like you're going to have a relationship with this plant no matter what, no matter who you are. It's up to you. You should do yourself a favor and find out what your relationship is. And you can only do that by like testing in different scenarios,
right.
Kind of thing.
Right. I love that you say that, because so many people will have this one mindset in their head and then blame it on the weed. And it's like, is it the weed, or were you just not in the right mindset to have that in your life?
Big time. And I think the other person who's consuming or you're helping understand has to also be in the mindset of like, this isn't the end all be all, and cannabis works differently,
right,
based on form factors,
right,
based on your body, based on your mentality,
yes,
based on your environment. Like there's all these entourage of different effects that are coming together to showcase that. And the challenge, I think, is with sometimes in retail dispensaries and things of that nature, a bud tender obviously has so much, there's so much onus on the bud tender.
Yeah.
And if that bud tender isn't educated well, or if, they don't provide a good experience, like someone like my mom walking into a store for the first time, like that's disposable income. That's, a community leader.
Right.
That's someone who can influence. If she has a bad experience, for whatever reason, product, experience in store, whatever, she might not come back. And then, what does that mean kind of for like her evangelism moving forward? So I think that's the danger, is the lack of education,
yes,
lack of centralized education,
yes,
kind of thing. There's not
true.
a resource to find out. Like everyone has their own kind of like channels or, whatever the case is. And so I think as an industry, globally, locally, domestically, like we have to have one central kind of idea, thesis, and like information set to give to people.
Right. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Just because I'm a herb advocate doesn't mean I think everybody should be smoking.
I agree.
Everybody thinks just because, I'm posting about it, it's like, I'm like, you need to have this in your life. Like, absolutely not. There's some people that really shouldn't be. You ever smoked with somebody and you're like, wow, weed is not for you. Like, they're like paranoid. They're like freaking out. I'm like, okay, maybe weed's not for you. But again, there's so much access to information nowadays that it's almost ignorant to judge somebody when there's different terpenes, there's different kind of flowers. People don't even know what terpenes are. Probably half of my audience is like, what's terpenes? Because there's not enough education. Jonah, do you know what terpenes are? My point exactly. So people are so ignorant to, I smoked that 1J and I hate weed. It's like, maybe what you smoked wasn't for you. It wasn't for your body. There's research, there's education that you can find the right strain for you, or the right product. It doesn't necessarily have to be smoking, right?
Big time. Utility and outcome. That's, I think, where the government may have failed us, and I'm hoping that they change, but it's up to people like us. But it's like, you can't necessarily talk about the fact that like, hey, this is going to put me in a happier mood, or this is gonna help me with this. It's very murky what people can say, even though and that isn't great for anyone, because that actually decreases the education level kind of thing. But it really just depends on kind of like what you're consuming. And the fact of the matter is, people think of weed as weed. These bath salts are weed,
Right.
right?
Right.
That's cannabis right there. Cannabis is this magic, beautiful plant that you can distill, extract. Like, there's so many different things. Think about coffee. Think about, coffee's kind of a really good example because, like, you can put coffee in pretty much anything, right? And you have a lot of coffee lovers in the world.
Yeah.
I have someone very close to me who loves coffee.
I
right?
love coffee.
Yeah, I like coffee. I don't know if I love it.
I love it.
But fair enough. But yeah, so I mean, cannabis can be creams. I meant to bring you some creams today. Remind me, I'll definitely send you them. Topicals, there's cannabis and like lubricant for lubricants for sexual intercourse. There's
No, literally.
there's one product, one company I work really closely with is Proofly. I don't know if you know Proofly.
Yeah.
They have a menstrual roller, right? That's incredible for
Yes.
period cramps and things
Yeah.
like that, right? Like, just amazing stuff is on this market that we're lucky here in Canada because you can't get that stuff anywhere else yet, right?
That's
Maybe
true.
outside the USA, but anytime you travel, it's like back to the illicit market, back to finding a dealer, back to we're so lucky that we get a
Right.
legal industry, even though it has its challenges.
Right. And again, it's not for everyone. Like, what I love about this community is we're the last people to stigmatize somebody else. Like, if it's not for you, we're like, hey, okay, it's not for
Yeah.
you, right? But you can always find what products do work for you. And like you said, there's other different kinds of products, different kinds of consumption methods. Like, it's not necessarily just smoking a joint, which is what everybody assumes. So obviously you're an advocate for wellness. So how do you kind of balance out wellness while being a consumer?
Balancing wellness while still being fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Just kidding. I'm not fun.
Because it does work for some people. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
people are so quick to be like, oh, it didn't work for me. You haven't realized it doesn't work for you. I'm like, no, we're different people. It does work for me.
I'm a big time consumer, but I found what's worked for me. I hurt my ankle the other day in soccer. I consumed cannabis. How did I do that? I'd rub some Proofly CBG full spectrum cream on my ankle. Good as new, right now. Before soccer, I smoked a joint, a general admission Tiger Blood joint. I didn't smoke the whole thing. I took a couple puffs out. You like that? Yeah, you like that? It's very dangerous.
That's
All
my
right.
favorite from General Mission.
We'll have to make sure that the Decibel team sees this. Shout out Decibel. They're doing some big things.
Tiger Blood's good.
And that's funny because that's the joint a lot of my friends like as well as Tiger Blood. That's hitting mainstream now, which is amazing.
Yes.
But it's about finding the right consumption path for you. Maybe it's a couple gummies from I had some pearls the other day. I had some 1964's full spectrum vegan gummies. Like, some of these ingredients are amazing too. Like, you have vegan gummies out there now, right? Like, shout out to Simply Bear 1964 and the whole Rubicon squad because they do big things. And so it's finding what works for you, obviously, but in terms of, like, I'm a daily consumer in some shape, way, or form, and most people might not even know that, but I enjoy consuming cannabis from a combustible perspective, from a smoking perspective, more in the daytime than I do at nighttime. Like, I love taking my dog for a walk in the morning, having a little bit of a J, whether it's Black Market, General Admission, like whatever the case is, and then being able to just use that time to think and get focused. A lot of people in school take Adderall and all these different things. If I need to get work done, I'll set a timer, I'll smoke a little J, and I'll just, get focused and get locked in, kind of thing. And then, finally, there's obviously beverages and things of that nature. In New York, there's an incredible company. They're called Heirloom. They've ran a 100-year apple farm. Apple orchard farm, and they have the most delicious drinks ever, and they're definitely substitutes and alternatives for alcohol and things like that, right? I think the trouble that a lot of people have is that they don't understand the onset and the offset time,
Right.
kind of thing, and so having brands who are delivering these products be more acutely kind of focused on the fact that, hey, here's your offset time, here's your onset time, here's kind of what you can expect. Having brands guide you a little bit more, because the thing is, if a novice smokes one of those Tiger Blood J's, it's obviously wrapped in distillate, like they'll go to space,
Yeah.
right? If they smoke the whole thing, it's their first time. So it's
right, Jonah.
I'm gonna bring you some. Jonah.
I won't forget. I won't forget.
It's true, though. It's all about knowing your limits. And it's crazy because it's only stigmatized when it comes to this plant. If we talk about alcohol, opioids, even just regular over-the-counter pills, people don't talk about the fact that they need discipline. They're just, whenever I have a headache, they're popping and they don't even think twice. You know what I mean? But when it comes to the herb, they're like, oh, you can't be consuming every day or every other day or you're a crackhead.
Yeah, the thing that absolutely blows my mind is you can walk into the LCBO and you can get like 6 bottles, 10 bottles of vodka, and it's just like, no problem. And it's funny because, you know, when you're 16, 17, like for a long time, like I couldn't drink gin, and I still won't drink gin, and maybe I'll have the occasional gin martini as I get a little bit older. I guess it's an acquired taste these days. But like I remember I had a terrible experience with gin when I was a kid, and I drank like maybe a whole, you know, Mickey or 2-6 or whatever the case is.
Right.
And it's like, I didn't know that I didn't want to consume any more gin until I had to have that experience. And the cool thing is, it's like, you know, you can't die from cannabis consumption.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you might get a little too high and green out or whatever the case is, but at least you'll find your edge, you'll find your limit,
right,
kind of thing, in a non-dangerous way. And I think a lot of people are so frightened to try and find their limit, but it's really such a personal thing that you have to do. You have to find your limit, and a big part goes back to like, how open to you are you learning about like your body, you know, new substances, things that could positively affect you, relative to just being like, no, I'm going to go get, you know, fucked up tonight and get, you know, get drunk or whatever the case is. Sorry for swearing.
No, you're good. You're good. But yeah, it really comes down to listening to your body, which was actually a crazy experience for me, because when I first started noticing that these herbs were helping me feel less sick when I would wake up in the morning, anxious, nervous, because I was stressed to the max, herbs would help me. And I'd be like, oh my God, like my body's telling me this is helping me, but I have everybody else telling me I'm crazy and that I shouldn't be doing this. It was such a confusing time.
Obviously, you know, everyone has addictive personalities, things like that. But I do think that it's up to the government, the leaders, people like us to just more so encourage like moderation, self-regulation, right? And so it's not like forget about alcohol, things like that. It's more so just like if that's going to be the comparison, maybe just like let's get a fair shot of it.
Oh my God, yes. Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
How we're supposed to be legal, but we're not treated the same. Like you were just talking about, anybody can walk into an LCBO. Children aren't allowed to walk into dispensaries, even with their parents. All packagings are completely sealed. You can't even see what you're buying, which kind of defeats the purpose of wanting to know what you're buying. And it doesn't even make any sense. Like I don't get how we're legalized, but we can't have the same regulations. Like even with advertisement, cannabis, I don't see any commercials. I don't see any bulletin boards. Like, how is it fair?
It's such a tough topic. I mean, because like alcohol didn't really get to a place where it's like this up until maybe like the mid 90s kind of thing, or mid 80s or whatever it was. And you know, we're kind of living off that, like, you know, in Prohibition, 1930s. You know, after that, you know, we're kind of living in that era right now. So I think that, you know, regs will loosen and things of that nature. You know, you look at a place like California, you can do stuff like that. You know, Minnesota, you have, you know, the ability to kind of get hemp-derived beverages into like actual stores. There's talk about consumption lounges, things like that. But I think in Canada, the big divide is between the fact that like Canada legalized, but their whole premise was like disincentivize cannabis, right? And that's why they heavily tax it. There's like this crazy excise tax. That's why so many LPs are struggling, things like that. And the reason they did that was because for two reasons. Number one, Health Canada, their whole mandate was public health, public health, public health. Cannabis, one of the reasons it was legalized was to create a regulated market, so it would take away from the illicit market, even though there's still a massive illicit market, right? As we all know. But it was more so for public health. Let's get this out of the hands of children, things like that, which is funny because that's where all the child it's funny. I heard Tommy Chong talk about this, but they're like the child packaging is so it's so hard to get open that only a kid who has that level of strength can actually open it, which is so funny.
Yeah, I feel like if your kid can open a packaging like that, then they're old enough to have that talk.
Yeah, for
like
sure.
They know what they're doing.
And then I think that, the other piece of it is like, it's a regulated industry now. It's heavily taxed. And so, from a finance perspective and, minister of finance perspective, like, cannabis was more taxed than liquor and beer combined last year. Like, that's bananas. Sorry to drop all these facts on here.
That's crazy.
But
Holy crap.
it's crazy. So I think that we're getting to a place where, like I said, shoes, more cannabis was sold in dollars than kind of was purchased against shoes, which is remarkable.
Crazy.
So I think we're getting to a place where we're definitely, getting more normalized and things like that. And honestly, I kind of like that there's all these advertising rules in place, because that's where people like you and I start to succeed, right?
Right.
If everyone was advertising it, there would be no room for new creators. There would be only like programmatic and digital ads and all the big, billboard companies like Pattison and things like that would be driving it. But it truly, these regs are creator economy. And they give people like us the opportunity. I'll give you one prime example. Trade marketing in cannabis is a very interesting one because of advertising and things like that. And so when I was at Lyft & Co., that was where I started my career. I don't know if you remember Lyft at all. Yeah. So I was the head of sales there for the first 18 months, helped take them public, and then we launched CanSell. And CanSell, government-mandated retail training program. Fantastic, but it's this module to help bud tenders obviously get educated, but it's also it used to be a place where brands could educate bud tenders on their brand as well, right? And maybe we would never launch that, or maybe Lyft & Co. would never exist, or maybe Kind wouldn't have existed if there weren't all these advertising rules. So it's
true. It's
challenging, but you can definitely get around them. I just think that the challenge is it's so fragmented. Like, there's no one central place. So you're building your audience. Like, I'd say if you're looking for cannabis info or understanding things, like, come to your podcast, right? BowlzNBeatz. Like, you're doing big things. But the challenge is it's so fragmented. And then, you look at the States, you look at Berlin, you look at, all these different places, and it's like, there are different paths of this education journey.
Yes.
And the cool thing is that if you are working Canadian cannabis today, you literally have seen the future, because every market is going to go through some iteration of what we're going through. And that's the only reason why I can be relevant in New York right now, because I've literally seen the future, and the New York market is 5 years behind the Canadian market, but literally following the same steps.
Exactly. I feel like that's why it's almost like our duty as Canadians in the industry to educate people, because we are the first ones taking that step and everyone's following. So if we're not educating, again, people are thinking of it as a drug. It's something scary, something my kids can grab and die off of, which they can't. It's crazy. Like we were just talking about, there's bottles, and like any kid can just grab a bottle and chug it and literally die. But yet we're treating cannabis like it's some sort of death trap if they get a hold of it, and it's literally impossible. But again, due to lack of education, which is why we got to be talking about it.
Yeah, and also like packaging matters so much. Like you think in this industry's taught me so much about consumer behavior. Like I didn't know why a bar of soap or how it got on a shelf, or like why my mom was buying Tide versus No Name, or whatever the case is, right? Like I just didn't, why are you buying Head and Shoulders, or whatever the case is, before I got into this industry. Now you're in this industry, and how do you market something that is completely stigmatized, is a medicine, was illegal, and now recreational, and also that no one knows anything about. Everyone thinks it's just like this thing that you put in a joint and you get high, right? So it's like the rise of that knowledge of consumer behavior is so important, and it's such an opportunity for Canadians, because Canada unfortunately doesn't stand, not to be all political, but they don't stand for much on a global stage right now. However, what we do have is this understanding of how to build a market, a functioning market, and how to market brands, and how to change minds, and how to create retail stores, and how to do all these things. And so if you work in this industry, it also gives you the opportunity not only to take that globally, but to take those skills that you've learned here in a hyper fast environment and take them into a place where whatever other industry that you're working in, kind of thing.
Right. So what has been the biggest lesson you've learned working in this industry as an entrepreneur?
There's two lessons. Number one is like good people are really hard to find.
Ooh.
So if you find someone amazing, even if they don't have the right skills at the time, if they have the right raw ingredients like competitiveness, resourcefulness, self-awareness, and they're bought in, nurture those humans, because good talent, I used to think talent was replaceable. They're not. Good people are no longer replaceable. Like,
damn,
in
you
this
guys hearing that?
industry.
Yeah, do that again.
Good people are no longer replaceable. I used to think differently, but in such a hyper fast environment, that's, good people aren't replaceable. Number two, I'm reading this book by Adam Grant. He's an organizational psychologist. His book is called Think Again, and it's all about the idea of changing your mind. And so there's this concept in there that, a lot of people, they're preachers, they're politicians, or there's something else, another P word in the alliteration I can't remember. I'll have to get, or they're professors. Professors are trying to teach you, politicians are trying to convince you, and preachers are trying to, do whatever, preachers do, get you to a certain place, whatever the case is. But then there's this concept of the scientist, and the scientist is you're constantly refining, and you're trying to be wrong. You're actually, whereas all those others are trying to convince you on a specific topic or why they're right or get you to an answer, scientists are actually trying to get, they're actually trying to prove why they're wrong.
Right.
And in this industry, if you want to succeed, the more you can take on a scientist mentality and figure out kind of like, and test your hypothesis and be okay and be vulnerable and being wrong, that's the power, and that's how you're going to succeed, because now you know what doesn't work, and the lessons you learned along the way are going to kind of fuel you. So my biggest learning is, like, if you want to succeed in this industry, you have to be open and willing to be wrong and vulnerable about it, and continue to build, continue to test.
Wow, that was great. Honestly, great advice. That kind of reminds me of a quote said by Albert Einstein. He said, "The greatest measure of intelligence is your ability to change your mind."
Yes.
Because a lot of people think they're so smart, but they are so narrow-minded and ignorant. And being smart is being able to not be ignorant, being open-minded.
Big time. And a lot of people, so like right now, I told you I have seven companies that I kind of work with. Two of them I co-founded, Cannabis Collective in New York, but in Canada, I co-founded a company called CanAcquire, which is a retail acquisition marketplace. And the whole idea behind it is trying to democratize M&A for small businesses. A lot of people who got into this industry weren't necessarily, were sold a dream. Now there's a lot of saturation. Right. Everyone's selling the same thing. There's, low margins, et cetera. And so what CanAcquire does is help position the right retailers for, successful exits. And it's like, even though I took a finance degree in school, it's like I'm not, I didn't know much about M&A, right? But because I saw a kind of a gap, a problem, we were able to build that solution. I got, my MBA in kind of like M&A from just launching, a product, launching a marketplace, launching a solution. That's the cool thing about cannabis is, like, if you see a problem, chances are no one solved it yet, right? So you can go help solve it, but it can't be geared towards, like, I'm going to make a ton of money on this. It's like, I'm going to help real people in this industry, whether it's from a plant perspective, a business perspective, emotional perspective, right, whatever the case is. And so it gives you a lot of opportunity to create. And the thing is if you take that risk, you have the ability to just, like, expand your horizons considerably versus just, like, working in, the same industry, like the CPG industry today. How much does that grow, right? 1% a year. Like, all your budgets are done, a year in advance. Like, all your campaigns are done. Here, you have to be so mobile, so nimble, so, willing to put yourself out there. So it's cool. Because
there's so much opportunity for growth, right?
Exactly.
So where do you see cannabis in the next 10 years globally?
Ooh, that's one of my favorite questions. Well, first, I'd like to see cannabis being bought in duty-frees in airports. I'm a big airport guy.
That would be awesome.
Let's go.
I hate plane rides, so that would be amazing.
I love airports. I actually have a event brand. It's called Polaris Elite, and the whole idea behind it is it's a high-class airline lounge, and that's where, like, executives are in, transition. Rising leaders are in transition. You can be kind of whoever you want to be, but the idea is that you're part of this, like, elite tribe kind of thing. So look out for that. I'm going to be throwing in a little event June 4th. I'd love for you guys to come. That's the event I threw in New York a couple weeks ago. But first, I'd like to be able to see duty free, being able to sell cannabis. That would be cool. And I actually done a video on that before. Walking through airports, I'm always just like, damn, I wish this could happen. But more, I guess, realistically, I do see cannabis being embedded in the medicinal landscape a lot deeper. I think before recreational cannabis can start to really roll out, people need to understand cannabis as a medicine first. And I think you look at, the UK, you look at Europe, Germany, et cetera, that's where, things are going to roll. But then furthermore, South America, East Africa, if cannabis can be understood and guided as a medicine and researched and incentivized and things of that nature, then there's a lot of power for closing the gap on global poverty. There's a lot of power in closing the gap on knowledge around terrible medicines for you, like painkillers and things like that. And so in 10 years, I'd love to see cannabis as a medicine mainstream with the right pathways to actually access that medicine.
I love that. I mean, I think the whole community would love to see that, right? And you don't have to consume, I just want to make this clear, you don't have to consume herbs to be an ally.
No, definitely not.
Shout out my sister-in-law, because she, does not do weed at all, but she's always supporting me, and she's like, if it works for you, it works for you. And that's how it should be. Now, before we wrap it up, can you give any advice to anybody out there facing stigma right now, and they know what they're doing is right in this industry, and that it works for them, but they're struggling with the stigma around them?
I think it's a really good question. I think if you're struggling with stigma, seek to listen first, right? Where is that stigma coming from? Before being defensive, before jumping to conclusions and be like, no, this weed's good for you or whatever. It's just like, hey, understand kind of where the stigma is coming from. Challenge it a little bit. Try and dive deeper and listen and actually flip the script on that stigma first. And then secondly, have a really good understanding of what your values are and where you're going in life. For so long, you're so kind of, you want to go to where society wants to go and things like that. And now we live in a world, as we've been talking about, that's fundamentally different from the world our parents grew up in. Right. And it's really important to have your value set. As long as you have your value set, whether you're a good, person, you pick up garbage, whatever you do, you play sports, whatever. As long as you're abiding to your value set, you don't need to worry about what anyone else thinks. And eventually they'll come around. And if they don't, they're probably not meant to be in your life anyways. And you only have limited time anyways in life, so don't spend your time with those people.
Very, very true. Drop the mic. That was amazing.
Thank
Great
you.
advice.
That was awesome.
Now I have one last serious question before we wrap it up. If you're smoking weed on a boat, does it make it seaweed?
Yes, it does. It does.
Okay. Anyways, just had to throw a little 420 pun before you wrap it up.
I got not a 420 pun, but I got one for you.
Oh.
Okay, what do you call a bear in the rain?
I don't know.
Any thoughts? A grizzly bear.
Oh. Oh, that was a good pun. I love puns. I love her puns. So
Thanks for
before
having
we
me.
wrap it up, can you just tell everybody where they can find you and what to look out for?
Yes, absolutely. I'm trying to grow my channels and my audience so I can amplify this beautiful podcast as well. Hit me up on IG, S_Kara_V. YouTube, Shabaaz Kara-Verani. LinkedIn is where I do most of my bidding. So definitely hit me up on there. I also got some TikTok nowadays.
Yes, you need TikTok.
I got some TikTok nowadays, so you can hit me up on TikTok, and you can always just message me on any of those platforms, and always down to have a chat and help guide or listen or be a resource in any way.
Well, thank you for being here. That was a great episode. Thank you for educating all of us. That's what we need. And thank you all for tuning in, because by listening and having these conversations and educating each other is how we end the stigma, right?
Also, shout out to persistence, because if I hadn't messaged BowlzNBeatz constantly, I wouldn't be here right now. So, if sometimes you get ignored in life, or sometimes you get a no, not now, it doesn't mean that the opportunity is gone. Just stay at it.
Absolutely. And my promise to the community, the herb community, is to be in the DMs more often so that I can get you guys on the podcast and give y'all a platform, okay? Well, thank you, Shabaaz, for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate you.
And y'all, you better like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Word on the streets, it's BowlzNBeatz. Happy 420.
Happy 420. Cool. Thank you so much. That was wicked.